Over the years, I've been on pilgrimage many times in India, especially in Vrindavan in the north and in Navadvip in Bengal in the southeast. And it's been a few years since I went, and when I was going, I was in, you could say, a religious mode. I was looking at others largely in the context of that path, Bhakti Yoga, that we were all in together. And I was thinking of who's more senior, who's more knowledgeable, who's been doing this for longer, who knows more about these places that we're going to, who knows more about the philosophy that we're following. But it's been a while, and I've gotten some distance. And the other day, I happened to open a folder on the computer full of pictures from about 2010 of all these people, many of whom I knew, going on this pilgrimage, walking around in these holy places and singing and dancing and hearing these pastimes of Krishna and Radha and so on. And it was funny because having stepped back and having gone through some inner processes myself, I found myself just looking at them as humans, as people who've somehow or another by their life path come to this pilgrimage. And I wasn't thinking in terms of, oh, they're very fortunate to come on this pilgrimage and this is the most pious path and these kinds of things, but I was just looking at them in terms of humans, in terms of stories. And so, looking at these photos, I've recorded some reflections on particular individuals, and I've done some drawings of them as well, which will accompany these reflections. I hope you'll have a look. I'm going to make some of these available publicly and others available on my Patreon at Story Paths. You are in a bustle of people. There are people selling beads for pilgrims to chant upon, standing in front of paintings of the god Shiva on an old wall. There's a man with a dhoti wrapped around his waist and a gamcha, a kind of Indian towel, wrapped around his head. There is a man smoking an Indian cigarette, a beedi, which is simply tobacco rolled in a leaf. There are people milling around, calling out names of Krishna, of Radha, of Shiva. They're following different gurus. They're in different groups, singing songs that overlap with each other in many ways but don't quite coincide. There are pilgrims sitting and listening to discussions about the sacred pastimes said to have happened and still be happening in this place. This place with cobblestone streets, this place with a mix of ramshackle modern and old buildings, this place on the banks of a sacred kund, a sacred pond, this place with this pond that has been excavated and surrounded by steps, by a ghat. Steps where pilgrims can go down to the water, to bow their heads on the stone of the steps, getting their foreheads moist with the water. This pond, said to be the very body of the goddess herself, in one of her many forms. The pilgrims dip their hands in the waters of the pond and sprinkle some drops in their mouth and on their head, and they mutter prayers to themselves. Priests wade in the pond, coming and approaching the pilgrims and offering their priestly services very insistently asking for more money than might be considered reasonable. But all this hubbub is going on, but you might step away from that. Leave all of that activity, all that buzz, different groups and sellers and practitioners who've been attracted to this place by the gravity of this place. But you might go off the hubbub because you see a group of older women, widows perhaps, as many widows do come to this sacred land through circumstances that may not be considered so sacred, sometimes kicked out of their families at an old age. But these widows, they've gathered together next to a fig tree, considered to be very holy, which is lifting up the stones on a pathway near the sides of the pond. And these widows, these older ladies, these eldresses, these hags, these crones, these mystics, they are washing a stone which is said to embody an aspect of the God, the divinity. Washing that stone with water filled with flower petals, with milk, with ghee. And they're doing what people here have done for many, many years. And these stories are connected with this place. These stories are rooted in this place. And different temples, churches, so to speak, groups may come along and claim these teachings. And yet those groups come and go, and the place remains, and the stories breathe, and the stories change as the temples change, as the songs gradually shift, as times move on, technologies rise and fall. People travel from far off countries and then are no longer able to travel there again. People wash their clothes in the pond, people bathe in there, kids play in there. Little shrines spring up at its side, then crumble away. After festivals where people have molded the forms of a goddess from clay and decorated her in glistening ornaments, they may take that figure, that deity, when the festival is complete and the deity is considered to have left that form, they may take that deity and throw her in the pond to return to the elements. All this happening next to a man who's just gotten out from taking a bath, and he's got a skinny little towel wrapped around his skinny little self, and he's wringing out his clothes that he's just washed. All this happening while people from busy, wealthy countries come here to contemplate what life's all about. All of this with the figures of gods under the trees, praying, perhaps for themselves, certainly for us, praying and blessing and praying as pilgrims walk around and around and around the sacred tree, and around and around and around the sacred pond. She's a young woman with headphones around her neck that she uses as a radio to hear the translation of the spiritual discussions that are being spoken by the speakers at the front, standing on a podium. But she also uses those same headphones to sometimes listen to her favorite music from back home in South America as she wanders around the holy places. And she likes the philosophy and, you know, the whole thing with the god and the goddess and the sacred places and the sacred trees and the sacred ponds and the sacred hills and the sacred stones and the sacred people and the sacred dust and the sacred food. She likes it, but, you know, she likes other things as well. She doesn't feel like she has to like it exclusively. She likes getting people wet with the sacred water, and she likes it when they splash her, and she finds the whole thing really fun. And she's not bound by the customs that the women of that place are bound by. So in some ways she's more free to be herself than the people of this place are, bound as they are by these ancient religious customs. So she snaps a picture with her and her friend, smiling at the camera. And in the back, there's a serious old man chanting on his beads. In the back of the picture, there's a cheap-looking chandelier hanging from the ceiling of one of the smaller temples. And in the back, there's a old priest approaching them with his hand out, just about to pester them for some money and question their piety if they don't give him that. And maybe the two girls, they'll laugh, or maybe they'll get annoyed, and maybe they'll return to this place of pilgrimage, and maybe when they go back home, they'll remain there, get married, raise kids, and move on to other spiritual interests. And the moment of this picture taken, we don't know. She doesn't know. She's not worried about that stuff for now. She's just having fun in this place where everything seems to be called sacred. There's a young man who comes on pilgrimage every year. He's from America, but he lives pretty much in India. He's not the kind of young guy you would expect to live in a monastery or to go on pilgrimage. He's, you know, put this gently, he's kind of a dick. He's kind of like a jerk all the time. Always got some smarmy thing to say, some sarcastic thing, prove that, you know, you didn't really know what you were talking about, or that he knows better. He's like cutting in this way, that way. He's got some strange sort of dedication. Got a dedication to what he sees as right. And maybe nobody else knows what they're talking about, and he knows it's right. And what does he know is right? Well, I can't quite say, but it's something to do with this pilgrimage. It's something to do with serving out sacred food to the pilgrims. It's something to do with the holy places. He doesn't really talk about these things in any kind of sentimental way. If he talks about them at all, it's just to prove something to somebody else, to prove that he knows better what's sacred, or what, you know, this kind of thing. But you gotta see, he has some kind of dedication. And why is he here? Why is he here in this place, in this company of people, with other young men like himself, in foreign countries, other people that you wouldn't expect to live in a monastery? This kind of fraternity, this spiritual fraternity that they're in, this boys' club, this religious thing going on that all these kind of lost boys tumbled into. Didn't find a place to fit in their land of origin. Why is he here? Well, who am I to speak for him, but I'm guessing that he's come for belonging. I'm guessing he's come for some group to belong to that appreciates something of what he has to give. I'm guessing as well that he's okay, at least on a surface level, he's okay about the fact that this group doesn't call out the parts of himself that he's not so comfortable with. Doesn't call him out to come into greater emotional awareness and intelligence and sensitivity. Doesn't call him out on not looking at the parts of himself that are stunted, that didn't get love when he was at an earlier age. These parts that could do with some growing up, but in a healthy culture probably they would already have been grown up 10, 15 years ago. So he's kind of working with having parts of himself that haven't caught up with his physical age, which is in his 20s. Kind of thin, light-skinned guy in his 20s. From somewhere outside LA. Survived in school, made it through, got a little tough. And here he is. Here he is serving out sacred food to the pilgrims. Here he is in a place that might not call him to grow, but at least lets him be. At least doesn't punish him, doesn't push him down. Here he is. She doesn't speak a word of Hindi or Bengali, and she only speaks 3 or 4 words of English. She is a foreigner in a strange land, far away from her native China, clustered in a group with other Chinese devotees coming to this sacred land. And she is about the happiest person you'll ever meet. In her native land, all spiritual impulses, aside from ancestor worship and some state-sanctioned varieties of Buddhism, are repressed, forbidden, banned. Although China is just north of India, the two countries, religiously speaking, could hardly be more different. China is officially secular, communist, state-oriented, practical. And India is a garden of religion gone wild. There are different kinds of practitioners crossing each other in the streets with radically different practices and worldviews and objects of worship, ways of dressing, mantras, sacred books, all variety of spiritual conceptions crisscross and coexist and conflict and get along and share space and don't share space, but do share the country of India. And so this older woman, and you've never seen a smile quite like hers, this older woman has come from China with a group of others, mostly older people, a bit of time on their hands, a bit of money to spend, at least on a plane ticket to India. She's come and she is amazed to see all the varieties of spiritual expression going on around her. And she's put some markings on her forehead, some tilak, some sacred clay. And she doesn't understand a lot of what's being said around her, but boy, she likes that people are so into cooking and serving out food and eating and bathing and busting into song, giving talks to big groups of people, bowing their heads on the ground, walking from place to place, touching stones to their heads and heads to the stones. She has never seen anything like it, and she absolutely loves it. In the corner of the temple, at the edge of the festivities, an older woman sits in a plastic chair, her tilak, her religious marking on her forehead, indicating her connection with Vishnu. Behind her, there are clay pots, clay cups, single-use clay cups, stacked and placed in baskets for people to drink lassi from, a kind of sweet yogurt drink. And the lady has neck beads around her neck, and she also has keys dangling from her neck, bracelet. She looks thoughtful and pensive and wry, a wry little twitch of a smile, like she's thinking about the behavior of someone, like she's grokking the behavior of someone, understanding something about them. Because this lady, she's lived within and around temples for decades and decades. And these temples are very male-dominated temples. They're kind of boys' clubs in a lot of ways. Celibate men, different seniorities, different levels of learning. But they're good places in their way. You know, all these boys and men who are boys, they have a chance to work it out and do their thing. And this lady, she understands a lot more about them than they might realize. She understands a lot of things about them that they don't really know about themselves. And they like her. It's unusual that a woman would be so close in this boys' club. But somehow, without compromising herself, her integrity, without bowing to their boy games, somehow she's there. And she's learning from these ancient teachings that they're learning from, sometimes more deeply than they might be. She's learning from them, and she's found a way to not take on all these boys' games, and at the same time, she actually likes them all. She actually cares for them. In her own wry way. So there she sits at the edge of the festival, watching and understanding something new about a person that she's known for some time.